Hey everybody, welcome back. We're continuing our reading of the Federalist Papers. We're still in Alexander Hamilton's essay, which continued the theme of how the Confederacy, any Confederacy, is unable to preserve a union. Let's begin. The separate governments in a confederacy may aptly be compared with the feudal baronies. With this advantage in their favor, that from the reasons already explained, they will generally possess the confidence and goodwill of the people, and with so important a support will be able to effectually to oppose all encroachments on the national government. All encroachments. It will be well if they are not able to counteract its legitimate and necessary authority. The points of similitude consist in the rivalship of power applicable to both, and in the concentration of large portions of the strength of the community into particular depositories. Where are those pockets of power being put, right? In one case at the disposal of individuals, in another case at the disposal of political bodies. A concise review of the events that have attended Confederate governments will further illustrate this important doctrine, and inattention to which has been the great source of our political mistakes, and has given our jealousy a direction to the wrong side. Again, jealousy can definitely get applied to the wrong people. This review shall form the subject of ensuing papers. Publius. Excellent. So we finished his number 17 essay. Let's continue. Now we're on number 18. The same subject continued. However, now it features James Madison. So we got two heavy hitters here. Hamilton and Madison. Just saying. Best duo. At least in American politics. Among the confederacies of antiquity, the most considerable was that of the Grecian republics, associated under Amphicontic Council. From the best accounts transmitted of this celebrated institution, it bore a very instructive analogy to present confederation of the American states. The members retained the character of independent and sovereign states and had equal votes in the federal council. So he's going to the Greek republics, independent city-states. They all got their own little right to vote in a federal council, but he's going to point out the failures of it as such. He's done it pretty well, but he's going to reiterate it. This council had a general authority to propose and resolve whatever it judged necessary for the common welfare of Greece. So notice this common welfare. Today, though, we have people who ask for specific policies based on race and ideology. So it's quite interesting to see some identity politics ruining actually the Union. Because identity politics turns into factions, and factions turn into insurrections, which undermine the Union if they become too militarized and self-serving. To declare and carry on war, to decide in the last resort all controversies between the members, to find the aggressing party, to employ the whole force of the Confederacy against the disobedient. Aha! To employ the whole force of the Confederacy against the disobedient. Now, that's unique. To admit new members, the Amphiticons, the Temple of Delphos, where they had the right of jurisdiction in controversies between the inhabitants and those who came to consult the oracle. Oh yeah, you know what's kind of funny? In the video game, they have the Delphian Oracle in Assassin's Creed. It's funny. As a further provision for the efficacy of the federal powers, they took an oath mutually to defend and protect the United Cities. But that's the thing, see? All the confederacies attempting to do what's best for all of them, but they all are still kind of independent to this whole federal union. Now, the tribes, many say that the Native Americans, if they would not have been in a confederation, if they were actually just united as one whole solid force and put past their tribal warfares, they could have maybe had more of their numbers survive, truly. But they put a wedge between certain groups and internal power struggles, and you balkanize it, you take them apart. The Spaniards did a very similar tactic when they went to conquer the Aztecs. You can identify these patterns of how they do this. And even if they take an oath to mutually defend, how many really do it? Again, he's laid out the insufficiency of a confederacy, right? And then what's even kind of more funny is that the Confederacy in America was beaten, So it's like confederacies just don't work. To punish the violators of this oath, and to inflict vengeance on sacrilegious despoilers of the temple. In theory and upon paper, this apparatus of power seems amply sufficient for all general purposes. In several material instances, they exceed the powers enumerated in the Articles of Confederation. You can also read the Articles of Confederation if you want. Not of the Greeks of America. I don't know if you can of the Greeks. It's probably somewhere. Had in their hands the superstition of the times, one of the principal engines by which government was then maintained. They had a declared authority to use coercion against refractory cities. Now, this is interesting. Refractory, those who kind of went back. They're like, we're not really going to listen, so coercion. So, those in the Confederation using coercion to force someone who's not really living up to their duty to do what they're told. That's interesting. And were bound by oath to exert this authority on the necessary occasions. So, bound by oath. So you had to take an oath. Hey, will you hold this, as he put it, refractory city accountable? Will you do it? You took an oath. You gotta do it. Some people have said that the UN is sort of like a confederacy in its own way, even though it's global, right? And some people say, well, the UN doesn't enforce human rights violations and do real things. They don't really have the authority. They're a joke. It's all just a sham. While others argue, well, we don't want globalism having any power to override federal or state lines. So there's a very unique conversation today between globalism, federalism, and states confederacies, right? Lots of things to think about there. Very different, nevertheless, was the experiment from the theory. The powers, like those of the present Congress, were administered by deputies appointed wholly by the cities in their political capacities, and exercised over them in the same capacities. Hence the weakness, the disorders, and finally the destruction of the Confederacy. Aha! So, what does he point out here? Weakness and disorders. Confederacies being more susceptible to weakness and destruction because you simply can pit the confederacies against each other, take down the whole mirage union that they both pledged to, right? The more powerful members, instead of being kept in awe and subordination, tyrannized successively over all the rest. Now, this is even more interesting. Many people argue that the big heavy hitters in the UN, they are very brutal to their people, right? Some of them, we won't name names, but we know where the charges land. They accuse the UN of overly being harsh on other states, nation states, who are more peaceful, don't have as many, violations, while they overserve other more tyrannical ones. So, again, he's pointing out that the stronger member in the Confederacy will, at times, rebel. And the mess of having to force everyone to keep everyone in line gets tricky. Because they're not united, necessarily, in terms of federal, where they all agree. It's a little different. Hope you're getting the nuances. Athens, as we learn from Demosthenes, was the arbiter of Greece 73 years. Yeah, that's true. The Lacedaemonians next governed it 29 years. At the subsequent period, after the Battle of Leuctra, the Thebans had their turn of domination. It happened but too often, according to Plutarch, that the deputies of the strongest cities awed and corrupted those of the weaker. Now, this is fascinating. We will read Plutarch eventually, but the bigger guy throwing around his weight, something we've seen. and that judgment went in favor of the most powerful party. This is something that they said, I think, why people favor the electoral college sometimes. Yet there's an argument to be made about populism versus electoral college, yet constitutional republic with a democracy versus a literal pure democracy, right? There's a lot of different angles you can take about what's better and how do you prevent the most powerful from abusing its weaker members. Yet, maybe one could argue you can never fully destroy hierarchy, there will always be hegemony. So there's something to consider there. Human nature versus idealized situations of government.